White saviour complex. What is it? It seems like a simple question, but in order to truly define and understand this question, there is a lot we need to unpack. So, in this video essay, I will be talking through the idea of the white saviour complex and trying to understand and answer some common questions about it. In order to tackle this issue, I think it's a good idea to start at the beginning. The white saviour complex is the idea that a white person has a responsibility to act from a position of superiority in order to help people of colour, as white people are inherently superior and more capable at solving others' problems. Obviously, the problem arises that from this it paints a picture that non-white people are unable to help or stand up for themselves, and instead it is the responsibility of a white person to stand up for them.
Come on, make some room, get this man a plate. Come on.
Ultimately, it builds an image that presents white people as superior to others and undermines the real struggles that non-white people go through on a regular basis. To understand the idea that persists in the modern day, it's good to understand where it comes from with some historical context. The history of this idea is tied directly to the history of colonialism. In the 15th century, strong maritime powers were able to effectively subjugate and govern lands disconnected from their mainland. Now, these wars were difficult to justify, so the reasoning the leaders of these nations gave is that the people they are subjugating are savages, they're helpless, that they're less than human. And this reasoning was used to justify many of the horrific acts committed during the colonial era. But this isn't a history video, so we're going to avoid unnecessary details. All you need to know is that the idea stuck and spread across the populations of Europe until it was widely considered a fact. And that's how the idea of the white saviour complex came to exist, with white populations claiming to have a responsibility and a duty to save native populations in the world by taking over their land, dismantling their civilizations and subjugating local populations. And this worldview is one that sadly still persists into many people today. How does this idea manifest in film? As this belief continued into the modern world, inevitably it reacted with the medium of film. This early contact went about as you would expect, with white actors always playing the lead roles and the heroes, whereas people of colour being pretty exclusively stuck to roles such as savage natives or as slaves. And as the industry developed, more equality started to be seen in film, and people of colour could occupy more sophisticated roles. However, any attempt to show or display the struggles that people went through in the fight for equality was always stopped by a white lead. The reason for this is that studios at the time believed that white audiences couldn't relate to it, so they always added a white character to help frame and base the film in something they believed audiences could understand. So now you have an idea of the white saviour complex came into existence and how it grew and spread. Let's look at how it affects film in the modern day. Now, you may think that the idea is outwardly wrong and deeply rooted in racism, such as this, would struggle to exist in society, given today's tolerances is much better than the 15th century. However, one way it has persisted is quite unusual. The white saviour complex is managed to exist in films which on the surface have anti-colonial themes, also in other parts in themes where race and identity is a big part of them. Now, of course, there are outliers to this, and this is a very small portion given how big black cinema has grown in recent years, but regardless, it's an issue that still exists in a percentage of films. And today I will be focusing on how it has influenced anti-colonial films. A very good and very unexpected example of this would be James Cameron's 2009 film Avatar. Now, you may be wondering how it even applies given its sci-fi nature and how it's a story about mining minerals on a planet of blue aliens. The film's main plot and themes are clearly based around events of colonialism, with the humans standing in for the colonists and the blue aliens standing in for native peoples. The film follows Jake Sully, a human who takes part in humanity's occupation of Pandora, a fictional alien planet. As the film goes on, he questions humanity's treatment of the Na'vi, which are the aliens native to the planet. Eventually, he chooses to swap sides and unites the Na'vi and leads them in a defence against humanity. Now, on the surface, this film looks to have an anti-colonial theme, with many people comparing it to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds for its negative portrayal of colonial history. However, this film does in fact comply and promote some negative stereotypes and ideals, mainly the idea of the superiority brought about by the white saviour complex. The Na'vi are depicted as tribalistic in culture, and they are losing the war against humanity until Jake Sully swaps sides, and by virtue of him being white, or in this instance a human, he becomes their leader, he enlightens them, leading them into victory. This story is openly following a narrative set by European colonialists in which they were not the oppressors but saviours, and it was their responsibility to lead these people who they saw as lesser than themselves. This story arc of a person from a stronger colonial power switching sides and leading the native people against them is quite common and can be found in many stories. However, not every story that follows this model complies to racist stereotypes. An example of the issue being avoided altogether would be a 2003 film, The Last Samurai. In my personal opinion, not only does this film avoid many of the pitfalls other films like it have fallen into, but it also effectively addresses the ideas brought up by the white saviour complex and presents them away. And not only does it not adhere to any colonial stereotypes, but also addresses the existence of the idea of them. The film follows a similar general story as Avatar. It follows Nathan Aldgren as he is sent to Japan in order to help subjugate local populations and secure the interests of Western powers. But after being captured, he decides to swap sides and eventually fights with the people he was initially sent there to kill. Now, just from hearing this, you would assume that it suffers with a lot of the same issues as Avatar deals with in relation to race. However, the way this film avoids many of these issues is by deliberately showing how colonial powers created these lies to get people on their side, by first having our main character being told these lies and then contrasting them with the realities of situations which are shown. Instead of native people being shown to have a tribalistic culture, they're displayed to have a more realistic and complex culture, more accurate to what would have existed in a time before colonial expansion. Another example is how it avoids the main character becoming the leader of the people or leading them into victory. As the main character grows closer to the people, he becomes a valued member in their society, but not due to his race, but because of the strength of his character, and he never takes control, such as happens in Avatar. And instead of leading the people to victory and turning the tide of the war, instead of the story flips the narrative, with the native people being at their strongest when Nathan is first captured and slowly getting weaker throughout the film. And the film's ending does not undermine real history by presenting the idea of colonialism as solved, but instead it shows a realistic, gruesome picture of the true face of suffering that colonialism has brought. Overall, this is a large issue with a lot to talk about, far more than I'm able to cover in just one video. However, I hope this video has helped many people to understand more about a lesser known issue in film today.